Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today, we're going to be going over the. I can't help but laugh when I do that. We're going to be going over the last of the Summon Necromancer skills known as Revive. Now, Revive is one of those odd abilities which you would think doesn't really have a lot to it, but underneath the surface, it actually has a lot going on. And as we go over it, I think you'll understand some of the more intricate things about this ability. So first things first, let's go ahead and reset our character. And I'm going to go ahead and drop some points into Revives. Now the first thing you'll notice is that it has a life percent bonus, which is given by Skeleton Mastery, by the way. So let me pull this off. That way you don't see that. So it has a 200% bonus to life passive, which doesn't go up. And as you level it up, the only thing that increases is the number of monsters. The mana cost does not increase. The duration does not increase. The life percent does not increase. The only thing that increases with Revives as you level it up is the number of monsters that you can summon. Now, 180 seconds isn't really that long. 60 seconds is a minute. 2 minutes is 120. And, of course, 3 minutes is 180. So the Revives last for 3 minutes total, which is not really that long. And quite honestly, it's so short that a lot of the times by the time you finish summoning your Revive army, they end up all dead. And this is one of the big downsides to me with Revives. That combined with the extremely high mana cost means that most of the time you won't be able to actually summon all 45 or all 40, if that's how many you end up getting, in the time that it actually takes to do so. Because you'll end up running out of mana long before you hit that magical number. As you can see, I was able to get to 12 before I ran out of mana there. And once they've been summoned, they are summoned with the effects that they're granted. So any plus to skill equipment that you have, any bonuses to skeleton mastery. No summon resistance, though. Unlike the skeletal mage, the skeleton warrior, the golems, they actually have the resistances innately given to them by those monsters. So they are not actually affected by summon resistance. So if you were building a Necromancer and you didn't actually want to put points into the skeletons, the skeleton mages, and, like the clay golem or whatever, maybe you only had Revives for some reason. I don't know why that would be, but whatever the reason, maybe you only have Revives. You don't need summon resistance for the Revives. But you do need summon resistance for the golem, the skeletons, and the skeleton mages. The Revives are affected by one ability, though, and that is, of course, Skeleton Mastery. Skeleton Mastery will give additional life and damage to the army. So when they are summoned with a high level of Skeleton Mastery, you can get a bonus life of up to 200% at level 40. And up to another, 400% physical damage at level 40. Now that physical damage, like I said, is only physical damage. So 400%, it's basically 400% off weapon ED. Think about it like a concentration aura or a might aura. It doesn't do anything else. So when you summon forth a mage or anything that does elemental damage, it's not going to have any effect on them. So strictly speaking, unless you're talking about melee fighters, Skeleton Mastery is only going to increase the sustainability by increasing the life of the monsters that you're summoning. It's also important to note that the life of the monsters is not affected by player count. So if you're in a player's 8 game and you summon forth, a whole bunch of monsters, it's using their base number, the base HP that they have, not the player's 8 HP number. On top of this, there's also a couple weird things with the Revives. Most notably is minions, or rather, there are monsters in the game that cannot be resurrected. And these are usually monsters that have some sort of, AI altering effect. And as you can see, all my revives just died. So totally lasted for a really long time. AI altering effects are things like curses. So all the Oblivion Knights are ineligible. The Minions of Destruction, which are monsters that are obviously in the throne room, the Bale Waves, those have stun added to their effects, so those are off limits. The Putrid Defilers, the Suicide Minions, that because they explode. Leapers also cannot be revived. I'm not exactly sure why they can't. I think it has something to do with the fact that they're jumping around all over the place. Bloodhawk nests, gargoyle traps, and tentacle beasts, those cannot be revived either. And when you revive monsters, they do retain the majority of their AI. So if you revive a monster that is stupid and behaves like an idiot and walks around, just like doing whatever he wants, well then guess what? You've got a really stupid minion that's going to behave stupidly, and he's going to walk around and do whatever the hell he wants. Which is why there is a specific number of monsters that people love to summon, or rather revive, with the revive ability. One such monster, which is among the most favorited, is the Bloodlords. Bloodlords are absolutely amazing, and you can usually find those in like Worldstone Keep level 3, Worldstone Keep, or Throne of Destruction. Generally, they also exist, I think, in Glacial Trail and some other nice zones, and obviously you have to kill them first, but once you kill them, you can get some nice minions out of them. Another very good revive minion is the Urdars. Urdars can often be found in River of Flame, Durance of Hate level 2 and 3, level 2 and 1, places like that. These are Urdars right here. The reason why Urdars are such good revives is because they have Crushing Blow. So when you revive them, they can also apply that Crushing Blow to the targets that you're trying to kill. Anything basically that makes a good monster that kills you very effectively is usually a very good monster to use to kill the enemy very effectively. Another one that I really like to grab and get my hands on is the Spear Cats, as well as the Fire Archers. The Fire Archers and Spear Cats make absolutely excellent minions. Inside of the palace, there are also archers that fire magic arrows. Magic arrows tend to be pretty damaging. Those guys are pretty good. There's also Urdars here. Instead, they're called Blunderbores. Ghosts also, believe it or not, make pretty decent minions. And you can get ghosts really easily by coming to Arcane Sanctuary. There's usually a pretty healthy chunk of ghosts somewhere around here. The reason why ghosts make very good minions is because they can stack on targets without you having to telestomp. So as you know, they have no physical form. They're incorporeal. And so they can stack on top of a target in infinity. So if you have a large number of ghosts that are stacking on top of a target, they can dish out damage in the same way that a telestomper would, without telestomping. So before you actually end up getting teleport and you can do the whole telestomp thing, using the ghosts as revives is a very cheap way that you can get kind of a similar effect, because the ghosts will dogpile on top of the monster and dish out massive amounts of damage because there's no physical form to them. And in this way, Revive has a lot of monsters that are very good to revive. And as you go through the game, you'll start to get a feeling for it. You'll be like, okay, well, these guys make really good revives. These guys make really sucky revives. A really good example of a crappy revive is something like the little cloud guys, the cloud raptors that float around in Act 1 and Act 2 and things like that. They're terrible. Like the ones that have the little nests. These guys right here will often just float around and do nothing. Yes, sometimes they attack, and yes, sometimes they also just do that. Right? So why do you want a minion that's half the time going to be doing that and half the time going to be doing this? Right? So if you summon or revive a whole bunch of these stupid little foul crows, they're not going to do your army justice, and most of the time they're just going to be floating around aimlessly doing nothing. And this is all AI that is programmed into the game. So paying attention to the AI is going to make a big difference on how effective your revives are. Some of them are garbage tier revives, which you don't want in your army. And some of them are actually pretty good. They're going to be, fast attackers. They're going to get in there. They're going to do stuff. Other ones are going to block doors, and they're going to be idiots. Zombies are a good example of this. Zombies have really terrible AI. A lot of the times, they will run up to you, and they will hit you one good time. And sometimes they will just stop hitting you and just wander away. And God help you if you just kind of like walk 5 steps, because a lot of the times they'll lose interest in you. They're also extremely slow, but they also hit really hard. So what I usually recommend with zombies is that if you find a big group of zombies and you don't have teleport, honestly avoid them because they're terrible revives. However, if you do have teleport and you can telestomp them on top of a target, get them. Because zombies hit really hard, they just have trouble targeting. Like, they're terrible and they're slow and they target badly, and half the time they just wander around and do nothing. But unlike the Cloud Raptors, which are absolutely terrible in terms of like how they do things, once the zombies lock onto a target like this, usually they'll stay. And they do hit nice and hard. So if you can get a full army of zombies and then telestomp them onto a target, they're actually far more useful than you would think. And as you go through the game and you start to experience all the AI of all the various monsters, you'll start to get a better idea of which monsters to revive and which monsters to avoid. One thing that I'll tell you, though, is that elemental damage revives tend to be very poor. And there's a specific reason for this. In my experience, and this is because I'm a Necro player at heart. I love playing Necro. In my experience, what I've noticed is that more often than not, you'll be traveling along and you'll find something like Gloams. Gloams dish out lightning damage. And Gloams are also immune to lightning damage, okay? And if you're in a situation where you have Gloams, there's usually more Gloams. And reviving Gloams to fight Gloams is just absolutely stupid. Because the Gloams are firing lightning, your Gloams are firing lightning, there's lightning everywhere, you can't tell the difference between your lightning and theirs. They're not killing anything because the Gloams are immune to lightning. And their Gloams are not killing your Gloams because your Gloams are immune to lightning. And nothing is dying except for you. So when you're in these weird situations where you have these specific monsters that are immune to a very specific element, and they dish out that same element, I honestly avoid resurrecting them because they make absolutely terrible revives, and they don't really help out at all. In fact, they usually just end up hindering everything, and they scare the crap out of your allies, and they end up getting you killed. And this goes for a lot of monsters in the game that are immune to the exact same element that they deal out. And it's kind of hard to go through and just pinpoint every single monster. But, as you're going through and you find these monsters, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like when you have a monster that primarily dishes out poison damage, and they're immune to poison. And then you revive them to fight more monsters of the same type, and they're pushing out poison damage to the monsters that are immune to poison, and you're doing nothing. This is a way that revives can end up causing you more harm than good, because you got to be a little bit picky about what you revive. Now, granted, when you're fighting a monster that has no immunities, it doesn't matter. So, like, say you're going to telestomp Diablo, or you're going to telestomp Bale or something. Bale's not immune to anything, so it doesn't really matter. So if you're going to build an army specifically to go fight a boss, then yeah, just grab everything that you can. Maybe avoid the Cloud Raptors and some of the other really stupid monsters like Fallen tend to be terrible revives just simply because they have such low hit points and they die so quickly. But in general, you'll get the hang of which monsters you definitely want to revive, which monsters you definitely don't want to revive, and the ones that kind of lie in the gray area. It's been my experience that anything that does significant damage to you and is not specifically an elemental damage type, usually is a really good revive choice. Especially because you have that very nice 400% damage bonus for off-weapon ED. And if you are going for a physical damage build, like for instance, maybe you have a Might Merc, they can also apply to the revives. Maybe you have a Pride on your Mercenary, which can apply to the revives. Or maybe you're using something like an Infinity, which is physical damage, like reduces those the defense of all the monsters so that your physical damage monsters can hit more often. There's tons of different ways that you can beef up the damage of the revives, and quite honestly, the physical damage aspect of the revives is really what you should focus on. The elemental damage ones are not really that great, and on top of that, many of the abilities that the elemental damage monsters have are stripped away. So, for instance, anything that is typically a healing or a buffing skill, spawning or resurrecting, is usually taken away from the monsters when they're revived. So, for instance, like when you go to Travancore and you're fighting those, specific monsters, the ones that have lightning. I can't remember their name right off the top of my head, but I'm sure we'll find one. These guys right here, the Hierophants, it says heals other. They don't heal your army. They'll cast spells. They'll cast the Blizzard. They'll cast the lightning. But they're not going to heal your army. And any monster like that has any kind of healing, buffing, spawning, or resurrecting skills are not going to perform those actions when you resurrect them. So like, for instance, the Fallen Shaman that has the ability to resurrect other, like Fallens. He's going to use his Fireball and his melee attack, and he's not going to use his Resurrect on the other Fallens, obviously. So he can no longer do that once you revive him. And many of the monsters have this thing going on where they lose specific abilities once they're resurrected. Now, there are things that they retain. So, certain monsters in the game actually have buffs depending on whether or not they're minions. So you can't resurrect unique monsters, or Diablo or anything like that. Oh, that would be really cool if you could walk around with a resurrected Diablo. But, like, say, for instance, you were fighting Shank, the Overseer, right? So maybe you're over here and you're fighting, Shank or Eldritch. These monsters specifically that say minion underneath of their name are considered to be stronger than other monsters. They usually have a very specific buff, probably something that came from the super unique monster that they're attached to, and those specific super unique buffs do stay with the minions when you revive them. So if the minions have something like additional resistances, or maybe they were given, additional damage, or maybe they're extra fast because they were extra fast minions underneath of an extra fast boss, anything like that is given to the minions in addition to what they normally have stays when you revive them. So seeking out minions can actually be extremely good for your revives. Like, for instance, say you were running along in, River of Flame, and you came across a unique Urdar that has minions, like, for instance, this one right here. We can go take a look, and we can see what the boss minion has on him for modifiers. And what we're looking at is Fire Enchanted Stone Skin. Of course, he doesn't want to stay still. Or Enchanted Immune to Physical. So obviously the Immune to Physical didn't translate to his minions, but the Fire Enchanted may have, which is additional fire resistance. So those particular minions may be more fire resistant, or they might not. It depends on what abilities are being transferred to the minions and what abilities are not. And as you can clearly see, they're not fire immune, they're not physical immune. So neither the Stone Skin nor the Fire Enchanted was actually being transferred to them. I think Extra Fast does transfer to them, and I know there's a couple of the modifiers do, but I don't know all of them don't. Anything else that we're missing here? Faster Cast. Faster Cast helps a lot with revives. So one of the main issues with revives is getting all of them up and alive before the timer runs out. As I talked about earlier, a lot of the times you'll end up running out of revives. They'll start dying before you end up summoning them all. If you have a decent amount of Faster Cast and a pretty beefy mana pool with some mana pots standing by, and a lot of corpses, which is usually something like the cow level or somewhere that you've pre-prepared the corpses, because obviously you're not going to have like 40 dead bodies just sitting there waiting for you. Not even if you go to the Neolithak portal in Act 5. I think there might be like 25 or something like that. I can't remember the exact number when you go in here, but I know it's not 40. But you can summon as many as possible within a short period of time. And the reason why you want to do this is because they only have a lifespan of 180 seconds. So if you're going to utilize them for a specific purpose, like fighting a boss, killing the Ubers, or anything like that, you're going to want them to have the longest duration possible before, you fight that boss. You don't want to, like, have one of them that's about to die in 20 seconds, one of them that's like 60 seconds duration, and then another one that's 180 because you just summoned him. You want to have all of them at as close to 180 seconds as you can before you hop through the portal and telestomp whatever boss it is. And that's one of the cool things that you can do, is that with Urdars specifically, Urdars have that very nice crushing blow chance. And so what you do is you try and get as many dead Urdars as you can in one place. You summon as many Urdars as you can, with a full skeleton army, of course. And then you can do things like telestomp on top of Uber Diablo or Uber Baal. And 40 Urdars for 3 minutes with a very nice, 15 skeletons or whatever you're running, and maybe even some mages, can make pretty short work of even the toughest monsters like Uber Diablo. And this is the really cool way that you can pull this off. But if you don't have enough faster cast, you're not going to be able to summon quickly enough to actually get that army running. The other important thing is that if you want to beef them up just by a little bit, you can have some pre-buff equipment. So you could have maybe like a really nice, plus to skill wand, maybe an Arm of King Leoric on your alt, and maybe a really nice Necro head on your other hand. And what you do is you only really have to have them equipped while you're summoning the revives. And you just go in, you summon all your revives as quick as possible, and you get out.
I can't.
Let me see how many I can summon again. Let me get a good number here with my... I don't even think I have any faster cast. Let me just double check here. So how much FCR am I running? I'm running 117% faster cast. Okay. So with this particular build, let's see how fast I can summon, or how many I can summon within this given time period. Alright, kind of messed it up a little bit there, but it was about 13. Let's try that again, because I feel like I can do better. I feel like I can do more. I can do better.
How may I be of help?
Let's grab some mana pots too, so I can really give it a what's for. I think part of the issue there, though, is there's a lot of line of sight going on through that portal. All the pillars and everything, and you can't quite hit everything as quickly as you'd want. Oh, 14. I got some more line of sight issues, but I got 14 that time. It really does cost a lot of mana, though. Like, before you know it, you're going to burn through all your mana doing something like that. And eventually, when you get your full army running for that 3 minutes that they work, it's pretty terrible. I really wish they would do something about the duration of the revives, because I really feel like it holds them back tremendously. 180 seconds, or rather 3 minutes, is just long enough for them to be useful, like to kill one boss. And not always. Like, sometimes, depending on the boss, depending on the player count that you're running, they might not finish the job before they're all dead. I've done this a couple times on some Summon Necros, where literally I get a full army, hop down and try and kill Baal, and they usually all end up dying. The revives all end up dying before Baal dies. And I think I did a solo self-found run with Necromancer a little while back, and I killed Bale in hell with some pretty poor equipment, mind you. But it took me, I think it was like 3 or 4 revive armies before I was able to finally kill Bale. It might have even been more than that. I'm not sure, but I know it was bad. It was pretty bad. I think the boss rooms are really kind of where things get amplified, though, because there's no corpses there. Obviously, you can't, you have to leave and you have to go build an army elsewhere, revive everything, and then come back. And like by the time you end up doing all that, you end up losing a huge amount of time. I mean, like let's just, for instance, just really quickly. I know this has already been 25 minutes, but let me just pretend I went to Canyon of the Magi, right? So I went to Canyon of the Magi, and I'm trying to build myself an army, right? So I'm running around. I build myself an army. I got my skeletons up. I got my mages up. I finally summoned my last revive. So I use my portal. So we got 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000, 7 1,000, 8 1,000, 9 1,000, 10 1,000, 11 1,000, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and then we click on the portal, right? I'll just freeze it at 18. Hold on, 18. So 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We've already burned about 23, 24 seconds just to, from the point where we summon the army, take the portal, run to the waypoint, run back to the other portal, and then teleport back on top of the boss. We've already burned a pretty significant portion of our revive's life just in the time span it takes us to run from the place where we're summoning them to the place where we're going. And I feel like one thing that they could really do for the revives, if they wanted to change this and they wanted to kind of like tweak the revives a little bit, is definitely come up with a way to make them last a little longer. I would kind of offer a couple suggestions. Number one, have their duration freeze when they're in town. So as long as the Necromancer is in town, have them stay alive. Number two, and this is just a kind of like a whole Necromancer thing in general. The Necromancer really needs a way to keep his army alive in between games. I think that would be really cool. So like if I'm on a Necromancer and I've built an entire raised skeleton army and I've built like an entire raised skeleton mage army and I've got like a full revive pack and I'm sitting in town, if I leave and come back to another game, honestly, they should just all be there. Like I'm a little like it's a little disheartening on the Necromancer. You have to really be a Necromancer and play a Necromancer for a long period of time to know what I'm talking about. But when you're playing the Necromancer and you've got your full army bumping and you're having a blast, and let's say you get kicked from the server or the power goes out or whatever happens that makes you disconnect from that game, even if it's only for a split second, and then you come back in, there's just this moment that hits you. You're like, oh man, I gotta redo my whole army. I had the freaking revives going. It's just, I already used up my Neolithak summons. Might as well just make a new game. Like, it's just this thing that kind of like us summon Necromancers know and we feel. And the revives kind of just make this even worse. Because at least the skeletons and the skeleton mages are pretty easy to revive and they stay up. Like once you've raised them from the dead, so to speak, they stay up for a pretty long time unless they die. And usually if you've got your Necromancer built properly, the skeletons won't really die very easily, and the mages aren't really that important anyway. So you're not really too worried about it. Your golem is super easy to summon, at any point, so you're not worried about him either. But when it comes to the revives, it's work. Like, you got to go kill stuff. You've got to get them all dead within a certain time period. You've got to summon them all at the same time. Then you got to go over to your particular area. And I just think it would be a lot cooler if they could somehow maybe, number one, increase the duration. I think increasing the duration from 3 minutes would be a big step toward making the revives more useful for the Necromancer in general. But also maybe freezing their duration when you're in town. Because there's nothing worse than having like a full Necromancer army. You got this full revive army. You're like, oh, I am the king. And then, like, I don't know, your girlfriend asks you to take out the trash or something, or whatever's going on, or maybe the dog's got to go pee. And literally, in the time span that it takes you to take the dog outside, let the dog go pee, and come back, they're all dead. Everything's dead. Like, all the stuff that you worked and, slaved over to resurrect your army, they're all dead. Now, there are a couple items that give the ability to revive monsters, and I feel like we should talk about that before I end this video. There are 3 items in the game that give the revive ability. Number 1 is Bloodraven's Charge Matriarchal Bow. Now, this is only usable by the Amazon, and it is level 5, which of course means that it has 5 revives. And there are 30 charges. The Eternity melee weapon has level 8, and it is 88 charges. Eternity is probably one of the worst rune words in the game, but it does have revive charges. And then finally, there is the Harmony missile weapon, and this is probably the best one of the lot because it has level 20, which means you can revive 20 monsters, but it only has 25 charges. Unfortunately, if you take the Harmony missile weapon off, you lose the revives. But it is pretty cool, though, because you can essentially have a nice little army, believe it or not, as a non-necromancer. And as we discussed earlier with the revives, honestly, the skeleton mastery isn't really that massive of a bump to the revives. The revive skill doesn't really get much more than just simply the number that you can revive, and the Harmony missile weapon gives you a very respectable 20 revives. Now, the problem with this, though, is it does cost 45 mana per revive. And depending on what character you're on, like maybe if you're on an Amazon or something like that, you might not have 45 times 20 mana to spend on revives. I mean, 45 times 10 is already 450. 45 times 20 is what, 900 mana? So you would need 900 total mana to summon forth an entire army using the Harmony missile weapon at the same time. On top of that, well, you might not be on a character that has a lot of faster cast, and the Harmony missile weapon is consuming your weapon and your shield slot, so you're not really going to have faster cast from those 2 sources either, and you have to actually wear the weapon. The Harmony missile weapon does give you some other interesting buffs, though, and that is the Valkyrie. So you get the Valkyrie as an O skill. It's kind of basically the freaking summon item of the game. So not only does it give you 20 revives, it also gives you a free Valkyrie, and it gives you the level 10 Vigor Aura when you put it on too, which basically means that you just have like a really fast 21-man army that's just running around doing your bidding, which is pretty funny. And believe it or not, the revives are actually pretty powerful because the revive skill doesn't really require a whole lot to be useful. Like I said, you don't necessarily need to have skeleton mastery for the revives to do anything. And if you were, say, a barbarian, and you could, beef up that army utilizing your shouts, or if you were a paladin and you could beef up the army utilizing your auras, or any other number of characters that may have ways to beef up or help their army. Like, for instance, the Amazon can utilize things like slow missiles and inner sight, and like the Druid could utilize things like the Heart of the Wolverine and whatnot. You can effectively get some pretty good use out of these revives to help you with things. And for the same exact way that the Necromancer can utilize Erdars and things like that, you could also, even as something like a Paladin, have a little 20-man army of Erdars to go do your bidding, if that's what you would like. And they can actually dish out some pretty good damage in that 180 seconds that they're alive. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when I spend 34 minutes talking about the revive skill. And as always, keep watching.